All right, great. So, hey everyone. Oh, you can see this. Hang on. There we go. So I'm Brian Bullerman. With me, I have Hank Bernard and Patrick Gillette. So we're here at Trouble One, and this morning we spoke about kind of effective phase 3 transition practices. That applies equally to the government folks that are running and managing these SBIR programs, or that want to use SBIR to solve an operational problem they have, as well as the phase 1 and phase 2 companies. So what we kind of described today was, and the slides will be sent out later, but this is really meant to facilitate and spark the right questions when you as a business are talking with your government customer or one of the end users. It's meant to really spark these kind of discussions to talk through some of these main, call it buckets of planning. And you're not going to have all the answers right away, but the idea is that at least now you know what questions to ask. And if your customer can't answer that question, then the key would be, well, who can, right? And so you start to put together a list of key stakeholders, and I'll call it just, issues or items or questions to be answered. And so you're putting together a puzzle, right? Phase 3 transition is a bit of a puzzle, and there's many pieces, and some you'll know and some you won't know. And some you'll discover at the 10th hour. And so, oh, there's a new puzzle piece that cropped up. Like, I got to solve that problem now. So every transition program is basically, there's a method of keep chipping away at the problem until you sort of get it all figured out.
So what we've kind of put together here, that what you're looking at is the need to kind of plan for success. And so if you're in the midst of your phase 1, identifying your customer, or you're in your phase 2 and you're working with your customer on defining what that demo might be and working towards that, here are some kind of macro challenges that are going to need to be tackled. From a business case, contracting, funding, dim val requirement and things like that, if you are successful in getting to a phase 3, these are going to need to be discussed and sorted out. There's lots of details. Again, these are macro. Each one of your capabilities, whether you're doing software, integrating something on a platform, or something other that might be just a little bit lower level, just having these conversations on each one of these areas to figure out who are the right people to answer some questions on who might fund a capability at the end. If there's going to be some validation work that needs to happen after your capability demo, where are those funds going to come from? How are you going to contract it? Why would somebody want to give you money, right? And that's the business case. Do you have a requirement that you're working against? Is there going to need to be some integration with an OEM or prime contractor? Are you going to have to upgrade TOs and things of that nature? So these are kind of high points that we challenge industry and government to kind of work through in order to be successful in getting to a phase 3.
And maybe one final thing, a little bit about us. We kind of introduced ourselves in the morning session briefly, but so Trouble One has been around for 20 years. We've largely, over the years, helped small businesses and non-traditionals, medium-sized businesses engage with the government for the purpose of taking advanced technologies and products and putting them in the hands of the warfighter. So our job fundamentally is to move things from the R&D stage or the developmental stage and move it to the operational stage. And so there's 10 of us here. We've got everything from a retired Air Force contracting officer to someone who's a senior civilian for a key technical area in the Air Force, to folks that flew, ran programs as acquisition officers, as maintainers, people that ran programs in the lab. So we've got kind of a broad spectrum of backgrounds here at our company, and that sort of helps us cover the breadth and depth of, I'll call it tech insertion activities for various things. So we have one question from Matt Mooney. Matt, I recognize you from the morning. So your question is, we are currently working with Army under an OTA, as well as starting to work with the Air Force under a phase 2 SBIR in 19.3. We need to be planning for phase 3 and funding described in the morning session. Regarding funding, is there a StratFi equivalent in the Army? I don't know. We only work with the Air Force, so I would imagine if you ask, probably.
I do think the Army and Navy have continued working their CRP initiatives.
Okay.
The commercialization readiness program. The Air Force has kind of morphed that into StratFi. So you may want to talk to the Army SBIR folks to see if they're still continuing the use of CRP. I'm pretty confident that the Navy is, and I believe the Army might be as well. So I would suggest checking into that.
Understood. And then just quick follow up on the commercial side. Are you involved at all with any of the FAA's UAS IPPs, the integrated pilot programs at all?
No. Answer is no. So the question was requirements across branches. Matt, do you want to maybe expound on your question just a little bit?
Yeah, so Kevin from Coach Plus. So we have two active SBIRs happening at the same time, different requirements, different needs, and because our enterprise software can handle them differently, we're kind of running them side by side, one for the Air Force, one for the Navy. Very recently, the Navy has asked for a POM to understand what a scaled pricing for our software would be. Software as a service. It's typically sold as a seat license in the commercial space, but obviously you start getting to the seat license in the gov space, and we talk about hundreds of thousands of seats. That is the scale for our pricing. So struggling with understanding how to justify what we think are going to be the requirements for the support side of things, as well as pricing a per seat license for the government. And honestly, like we're just throwing darts in the dark right now.
Kevin, I just want to make sure I understand your question, right? You're basically trying to understand how you would go about pricing for the Navy. Is that?
Well, I mean, even finding a playbook or even comparables to take a look at to understand what commercial software is on a seat license in the government. Like if I was buying Adobe Acrobat for my enterprise organization, I can go find price on Adobe. Yeah. If I go to the government, like what are they paying? Obviously, it's going to be a discounted rate for the scale, but can't be that discount. So, like finding the right price to target it has been a challenge for us. And honestly, it's been a challenge for a couple of years. The first year we came in on a POM on pricing, and they got sticker shock and it kind of scared away the customer for a good 6 to 8 months. So we don't want to do that again.
Hey, whoever's typing, you guys just mute yourselves, please. That'd be awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have anything off the top of my head, Kevin. So the best thing to do would probably be to, whether it be through industry partners who have sold to the government, get an idea of pricing in that respect, or just to get some kind of reference baseline for like, well, hey, how much do you guys normally pay for that? I mean, I can tell you what a Hellfire missile will cost. I can tell you what it will cost, but hard for me, and largely because those things are based in
Keep going. He's not you.
just physical. There's easier to price physical things, I guess I would say, but yeah, I think you just have to do some due diligence and homework, and maybe just throw out a range of prices and see what doesn't scare. That's kind of a crappy answer, but it's hard to. One, software's hard to price. It's value based in many ways, and then two, that's not. You're asking a local guy to comment on Navy software pricing. It's it's a difficult question to answer. So I just say you have to kind of just play, investigative journalist game and start to ask around and kind of figure it out. May I ask a question? Does he ever procure from the Army?
Was ever procure from
the Army? Yeah. So the answer is yes. So one example would be. The answer, I guess, is maybe. So think about areas where the Army, let's say, leading a technology area. Helicopters would be one, but more importantly, like conformable wearable batteries for special ops soldiers. That'd be an area where, one, the Air Force lets the Army lead that train. And the Army sets up an idea contract, let's say, with Bren-Tronics or some manufacturer. The Air Force then can leverage that contract. So the answer is, I would say the Air Force probably doesn't procure directly from the Army. I would say the Air Force might use the Army's contract vehicles to get to a fighter, where they have common.
If you set up a phase 3 contract, it would allow multiple agencies to buy in as well.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if you had a phase 3 contract, then any federal agency can actually put money in that contract if you scoped it the right way, obviously. In that case, the Air Force could use an Army phase 3 contract to buy hardware services. Okay. So you want us to expound more on the phase 3 contract idea?
Yeah, it looks like I might be on.
Okay. I think they went back to muting everybody because it was getting a little bit crazy. So, all right, yeah. So on phase 3 contracts, so in a nutshell, the phase 3 contract allows any federal agency, and I say federal and not DoD because it could be Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, whatever. But any federal agency can award a sole source phase 3 contract off of a phase 1 or phase 2 SBIR program for that specific technology or product or scope of work. So what does that look like in practice? And that phase 3, so normally the government could not just write a sole source to anyone they wanted to. They would have to compete it or complete what they would call a justification, J&A, that says, hey, no one else in the world can deliver us this. That's why we have to go to this. Or no one else can deliver it on our schedule or our time. But the SBIR program allows the government to say, hey, this was previously competed in a research phase, and now we're going into from this company. And it's all legal, and it's practicing. So what is that?
This is Greg Carver. Can you expand a little bit on your on the use case involving the interaction between robotic systems and individuals on a factory floor? What was that something that you mentioned? Maybe I misunderstood the use case.
The example I gave was, so the Army for their ground soldiers have conformable wearable batteries that power all their electronics. The Air Force also has ground soldiers as well, but a much smaller number than the Army does, obviously. So what the Air Force does is, by and large, or in some cases, leverage the Army's contract vehicles, where let's say the Army is contracted with Acme Battery Corporation for these batteries. The Air Force says, well, look, we're only going to buy 10,000 of these things, so I don't want to go through all the trouble of writing my own contract. We'll use the Army's contract vehicles and send them money, and then they'll procure 10,000. So what we're explaining is, if you are a small business, you can set up a phase 3 contract that basically can span the full federal government. And when you set it up, any government agency can send you money and place an order on that contract. So it is.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Agency.
Yeah, no, I think your example was spot on. And so, talking about that valley of death, right? We've got a very excited Army customer who's starting to generate excitement within the Air Force. And we've got a very high quality prototype, TRL 6 to 7 kind of range. And obviously it's going to take us some work to get the full life cycle requirements implemented to get to that full product launch. And so, earlier today, you did a great job describing the steps to get through there, all the stakeholders, the contracting, the legal side of it. I think it was a great slide deck. Just the mechanism to get us from where we are today to where we'll be able to fulfill a phase 3 contract for, thousands of units is exactly where we're at as a company. And so, understanding that contract mechanism, so for example, hearing the Stratify presentation today, at least the Air Force is willing to offer some funding to help companies get through that, that valley of starvation. And so, anything you can talk about, maybe some role model companies that have been through there and succeeded on the other side.
I'll give you an example. Yeah. I'll give you two examples. So one would be, let's say you're at near the end of phase 2 and you do have good customer engagement and a lot of these kind of things kind of figured out, but we have a client there now where, hey, really successful demo test. We know we can, double the maintenance overhaul of some UAV systems in the field, savings for the fleet. But we need to do this like, multi-month field trial, right? We need to send 10 days out in the field with the endurance technology and trial it with some operators. Costs money and time, right? How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of different things that we're exploring. Or options we could go down. Option A could be an Army customer or the Air Force could give us what we call bridge funding, extra SBIR money, right, through a Strat-5 program or a CRP program. Or we might be able to go, let's say, to SOCOM and say, hey, could you give us a sequential phase 2 SBIR? They could potentially write you a second phase 2 SBIR to cover that new scope of work that's related to, basically field trialing or flight trialing that technology.
That's some reprogramming of money as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, or they could basically say, look, we'll give you a phase 3 contract, even though we're not. So phase 3 can cover not just buying hardware or software. It can fund testing. It could fund product enhancement. It can fund a whole bunch of stuff. And so what they could do is say, look, here we're going to give you a phase 3 contract and we'll put $500K on that to do all these field trials that we need you to do. So that's an option. Another option is they could say, look, and this is one that SOCOM has used before, and this is where you get into colors of money, and there's some gray area. But if they say, look, we're going to buy 10, I'll call it low rate production or prototype units, and let's say you normally price those units at 10K a piece. Well, we're going to buy them for 100K a piece, and you're going to use that sort of extra, I'll call it profit or whatever, to go fund your own flight trials or product enhancement or whatever to show us all this maturation that we want to do. So there's different ways you can do things on a phase 3. They can actually put different types of services. They could pay you. Yeah.
Real quick. The most important thing when you're stepping to a phase 3 is going to be a couple things. One is we see that companies and government partners that write phase 3 contracts that are very narrowly focused are going to have challenges beyond the particular work they're trying to accomplish, right? So Brian's example of a government customer wants to provide 500K for some validation testing, and that's what you write your phase 3 program for. But now let's say that customer says, right, your validation testing, now I want to acquire X number of units. Well, you can't use that contract anymore, right? Because the way how narrowly the scope was written. So we challenge our clients and folks that we're consulting with that you want to write a phase 3 contract to talk about a technology area and then the R&D that's required for that area, product modifications, and product sales. If you can write and it's almost like a broad IDIQ type contract to where your government customers, depending on where they are within their program, wherever the Air Force is ready to buy something or the Army's ready to needs to do some product modification to meet a spec, then it could be a conflict. Does that answer your question a bit?
Great. I think that full range of possibilities, is kind of what my job will be for the coming months, right? Is to figure out how we want to tackle this. So.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I would just challenge you guys to think about how you can write it as broadly as possible, so it can be a catch-all for all government agencies as you're kind of trying to roll out these products. Jack, if you're still on the phone, could you? We're just coming across your question here from SBA upgrade to phase 3 this May. What do we do when DoD customers do not know about upgrades?
Yeah, I'm still on the phone here.
Okay. Can you maybe clarify your comment there?
Yeah, we just got a phase 1. We just actually this morning pitched phase 2. Yep. We're in touch with the Air Force, AFWERX, GSA, phase 3 group. And what we're finding, and when we reach out to customers, is that they don't know anything about contracting through a phase 3.
Right.
And so when you say like sole source, it actually works in the opposite way. It comes across as a negative because they have no experience with it. And it's
Yeah, you're, no, you're, I
you
agree.
know, it's we're running into a roadblock because it appears that these new procedures are all approved and everything, but the customer is scared of using it.
Yeah, and there's a couple things there, right? It's, one, phase threes aren't new, right? AFWERX didn't invent phase three. SBIR's been around for, quite a while and leveraging phase three, but you're 100% accurate that there's been a shift, right? Where SBIR contracting was done out of the research lab, and now we're moving it to where basically the customers are running, the end users are running these programs. And so the challenge is education, right? To where, it's educating, the broader Air Force that how and where, these SBIR programs can be leveraged, whether it's doing a demo in phase two, or, acquiring a capability sole source in phase three. And so, so I hear what you're saying. I guess there's no perfect answer, but we've seen that elsewhere. And a big part of kind of our job and what we challenge industry as well is you're kind of providing an education for the Air Force, and if they need to be convinced from somebody with a .mil address, well, then we can put them in touch with the SBIR contracting folks or folks at GSA and make them part of the process, so they can become educated. But you're right that it's a bit of a cultural change and it's a bit of an educational thing that has to happen as well.
Yeah. If I get my phase two, maybe I'll have some money to actually spend on educating. It's one of those things that it's it takes some money to reach out in those directions. I just wanted you guys to know our experience, and it's a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge.
Yep. No, you're exactly right, and your challenge is not alone.
Yeah, let me just say one more thing. We're trying to sell ultra efficient buildings to expeditionary bases. So we're actually in the facilities area.
Yeah.
And every engineer forever has been told never name a product, never ever specify a product. This is drilled into them over decades, frankly. And through and say, no, you can name us now. You can even specify us by name. It's counter to pretty much everything they've been taught. And so we're in a particularly difficult area for this.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll go back to the SBIR program and the changes that the AFWERX team are making. It's a big part of it is cultural change. That you're empowering end users to be able to bring technology to the fight, leveraging this SBIR program, where in the past the SBIR program was just a lab-based program focused on I used to call it like the innovation sandbox, and every once in a while a shiny toy would pop out of the sandbox, and we called that tech transition. And now it's much more geared towards less of lower TRL, MRL ideas and things that are more mature that can solve problems right now. That's cultural shift in thinking, not both from industry but also the government, that has to happen to kind of enable this, because we've been so used to the slower process.
Yeah, so we're hoping it speeds up. We just wanted you to know our experience, reaching out on this new phase three. The more about we can get, the better. We're actually, in our area, TRLs are not a good descriptor of product, because for the entire DoD to purchase facilities, you simply have to comply with the building code, the DoD building code, and then you have, quote, an approved product. It's a saleable product. And we do that. We significantly exceed the DoD building code, by the way. And that's just a sales issue. But in our area, we phase 3, and we're searching for ways to make it happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You made a great point on, TRLs don't always align. And, we used to always say that small business TRL and what I would call prime contractor TRL differ, right? And so I'm kind of hearing what you're saying as well, that anybody can look at the TRL on, Wikipedia and figure out, well, yeah, I just did a demo. We're at TRL 6 or 7, and I flew it on a UAV. It means I'm at TRL 7. And you take it to a real government customer or a prime contractor you're trying to integrate with, and say, look, guys, you're really at a TRL 4, and you got ways to go. And do you even know about these certification standards that you need to meet? Have you done the testing? Can you prove it? What scale up manufacturing capability do you have? Now those are more difficult, challenging questions that you have to be able to answer. So, good questions. I got a question here from Cyan from Caney. Apart from actively reaching out to PEOs and AFRL, is AFWERX for the pitch to the PEOs listed? I don't believe so, but I don't know that for a fact. But what I would say is that do not rely. So AFWERX is not a vehicle to go transition your technology and find you customers. Their vehicle was a setup to, open the aperture by creating these open topics, funding companies in phase 1 to perform activities that provide some funding to allow you to go find customers, develop a relationship with that customer, look to get an MOU signed because that's required for phase 2. And start developing that tech plan for that demonstration that you're looking to complete in phase 2. And so I would challenge everybody not to rely on anyone but yourself to make that happen. So while let's say they do forward your pitch to the PEOs listed, don't forget the PEOs aren't just waiting to find new small businesses to work with. I was meeting with Miss Linda Rutledge the other day at PEO Mobility. She's got a $4 billion program to execute, ensuring that her mobility fleet is accomplishing the mission that her customers need fulfilled. And so while they're excited and motivated to help small businesses, and just keep in mind that they have very challenging jobs on a day-to-day. So the challenge is on industry and yourself to identify those customers and put together those phase 2 plans where your capability might be able to fulfill a gap the Air Force might have. So while they may forward those pitches, it's going to be, I would say, incumbent on you and your team to really drive that home. So hopefully I answered your question there, Cyan. Looking through here. Right now, we've answered most questions on the chat side. Here we go. So Matt, you asked a specific question about Guardian Angel for personal mobility. I know a little bit about that program and who would be considered the customer for that group. you have the customer and then you have an end user, right? So your customer might be someone who's managing that program, could be somebody within the mobility PEO, but your end user might be somebody in the field that is defining the requirements for that effort.
Exactly. Yeah, we have a master sergeant that's very excited to try it out, super supportive, and as we're working through the customer side of it, trying to figure out would it be best to work with, you know, his leadership team there, or to go to the material command, or a different direction. Maybe this is highly special to my particular company, so I don't want to waste other people's time, but it's front and center right now where we're really struggling to, you know, engage a customer that is willing to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, what I would say to that, and just from personal experiences, I personally have worked at a couple of programs that we, our customer end user are kind of one and the same, one particular program, I should say, at ACC at a major command. And what I would say is the interaction that we can get from them, because these are the guys that are driving the requirement, can reach back down to the PEO and say, hey, we're getting a lot of positive feedback on a phase 2 demo that we're doing. We see that there might need to be some validation work beyond this, or some additional engineering effort to get it to a product that we wanted to buy, and we want to reprogram some dollars, right? Well, if you're working with the PEOs can't always do that unless they have some of their own discretionary funds, right? Their funds are kind of pre-allocated. And so this is where I like working with kind of the end users or the MAGCOM customers, that because one, you're getting requirements directly from the source, right? Not third hand. They're engaged in your program enough to want to be able to sign an MOU. And I saw someone had a question about an MOU. I'll explain that in a sec. But yeah. So hope I answered your question. But yeah, sometimes your customer.
This is Greg Carver from Boynton High Ventures. Have you guys done any trials specifically on helicopters?
Have we done trials on helicopters? We've had technology that's been won through some validation effort with like a health and usage monitoring box on helicopters, and a few niche technologies. Is there a specific reason why you asked that question? I don't know if you cut out. I want to answer the question. Somebody asked.
Thank you.
Yep. Somebody asked about an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. So MOU is when you get a phase 1 program, AFWERX, during that phase 1, a 3-month effort, AFWERX is asking you, industry, to go find a customer that would be, or an end user that would be interested in your technology, right? Find where, somebody has a gap. You explain your technology, what it can do, and discuss how you might be able to demonstrate how your unique technology could fulfill a gap that they might have. And you could leverage kind of free outside dollars to demonstrate that capability. If your customer says, that's great, I'd love to, work with you guys and leverage this SBIR AFWERX to do so. What do I need to do to get started? How do I help you? The answer is for a phase 2, to be successful in a phase 2, you have to have a signed MOU from an Air Force customer that you include in your proposal package. So you write, your proposal package consists of 15 technical pages, 15 charts, a 90-second video, and a signed MOU. And that MOU consists of describing who that customer is, their knowledge of working with you, the plan that you guys have kind of put together to successfully demonstrate it, that there is an intent, I use the word intent strongly, that if the demonstration is successful, that they would intend to try and want to transition that capability. So yeah, that's what's in an MOU, among a few other things. So again, if you're writing a phase 2 proposal and you have a phase 1, you would need a signed MOU from your customer to be successful in that. Excuse me. I've got another question here. What are the requirements to be considered for a phase 2? Well, I think I might have just went through that along with, oh, yep, it was the same person asked about the MOU. So yeah, 15-page technical proposal. What the MOU to me is the most critical, right? The MOU means you have a customer that you've engaged with during phase one. You've done your tech planning as to, okay, where and how can we demonstrate this? What's it going to take? What's it going to cost? And that's kind of all built in within that MOU, right? And all the phase two technical proposal and chart package is just kind of explaining, providing some technical background on your capability, describing who your customer is, what's their gap, how your capability fits into their gap, and the demonstration that you're going to work through in phase two. So again, 15 charts, 15 technical pages, tech writing, tech proposal, 15 charts, MOU, and a 90-second video just kind of describing the program. That's required for phase two. So I got a question on when would I recommend to speak funding about a phase three effort. So if you weren't in on our call earlier when we walked through these charts, one of the main takeaways was that you need to be having conversations with your customer about what I'll call planning for success, and that is phase three planning from the outset. As soon as you've engaged with that customer and you've come up with what that demonstration might be, you're going to have to ask some challenging questions like, hey, if we are wildly successful in this demo, we need to be working through, is there going to need to be some additional engineering or a validation effort? Do you have a contracting shop that's going to be able to support a phase three? Who and how are we going to fund a phase three if you want to buy X number of units or X number of seat license for a capability? Are there other stakeholders that we need to be engaged with, whether it be from a program office level or some other tech expert that needs to be pulled in to kind of sign off? Are there changes, policy, technical orders, things like that, that need to be addressed? And so what you don't want to have happen is you get through the end of your phase two, and as you said in there, that there are these accelerated cycles these days where you only have a three-month phase one and a 12 to 15-month phase two. And if you're just so focused on finding a customer and get to that end demo, and you're not having these conversations, well, when your phase two program ends, that I guess that kind of defines what the valley of death is. Because if your phase two ends and all of a sudden you're talking about all these challenges, and well, yeah, we need to get John involved from contracting and Sarah from the program office, and now, man, yeah, we've got this mill handbook 516 that we need to bring into play to kind of explain to you the certification challenges you're going to need to kind of work through. And wow, who the heck's going to pay for that? Do we have to plan for that? Do I have some discretionary dollars I can use? Can I reprogram money? So yeah, the recommendation is as early as possible, and you'll hear us use planning for success a lot. Because if you plan for success at the end of your phase two, the valley of death, we'll say the valley of death exists whether the SBIR program lived within the lab, right? And the lab was worried about doing capability demonstrations in phase two, putting great prototypes on their desk and calling it a day, and not really engaged in working with end customers to transition technology. Or the valley of death exists, with your end customer, which is, hey, there's good funding right now for capability demonstrations, but if you're not having these conversations about the, I'll call phase three transition process from the outset, then when your phase three program ends, you're going to be in a tough spot. So beyond phase two funding is challenging. I know there's strat time. You'll hear about the program offices having, lots of money, but again, a lot of times that's programmed for other efforts, and it's challenging to get a program to be reprogrammed for yours. So I hope that helps, but from the outset is our recommendation. And ATO, yeah, there's lots of authority to authorization to operate software-based efforts. Little interaction with that, but I know it's a challenge right now. I believe even AFWERX is trying to set up, because we're getting a lot of similar questions of almost like an ATO working group that folks could go to and and use as a resource as to how they kind of go through an ATO process to be able to bring a software solution forward to the Air Force. Looks like we have, so just so everybody knows, we will be PDFing these and providing a copy to the AFWERX team, so you have them. Again, highly recommend. You could take this presentation, sit down with your customer, and walk through kind of each one of these 7, I call them macro transition focus areas, and kind of dive into the details, because each one of the programs is going to be unique. But you all have, every single one of you will have a funding problem, a contracting problem, a validation effort, stakeholder alignment, all those areas, you name it. And so identifying who those people are and how you're going to tackle them with your customer as early as possible is highly, highly recommended. So, hopefully this was helpful for you guys. All right. I don't see any other questions. If nobody has anything else, I guess we'll wrap up today's call.
Guys,
All right.
very helpful.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Again, we'll be getting these charts out to you hopefully shortly. And appreciate you guys calling in, and have a great day.